Ken, it's been more than 6 months since Aisha Nelson called police to say her ex-boyfriend was threatening to kill her.
He followed through on those threats, and now an internal investigation blames in part 2 Dayton police officers' response to Nelson's calls for help. 2 News reporter Kajasia Hawkins joins us live in the studio. Kajasia, you talked with Aisha's family and attorneys. What are they telling you?
John, both Aisha's family and attorney Michael Wright say that police did not listen to her pleas for help, and it ultimately resulted in her and her daughter's lives being taken.
He didn't start doing any of this until after he grabbed the gun. And this is the second, he said 2 times, asked me, am I willing to lose my life? And I don't like that.
Imagine calling for help again and again, only to have your voice dismissed, your fears overlooked, and your life reduced to a footnote in someone else's report. Now picture this: a woman, calm but trembling inside, whispering her final warnings into a phone line, pleading for someone, anyone, to hear her before it was too late. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't chaotic. She was steady, controlled, careful with every word, because her life and her daughter's life depended on it. But calm doesn't always mean safe. In fact, in this story, her calmness was mistaken for comfort, a tragic miscalculation that would cost not 1, but 2 innocent lives. This is the story of Aisha Nelson, a Navy veteran, a twin sister, and most importantly, the loving mother of a little girl named Harper. Together, they built a world of bedtime stories, morning laughter, and small, ordinary joys. But their world was invaded by a man who once promised love, and instead brought control, intimidation, and violence. And when Aisha did what society tells survivors to do, call for help, the system failed her. Police officers stood inside her home, heard her fears, even saw the tension in real time. But they left. They walked away. Hours later, Aisha and her daughter would be gone, shot to death in the very home she begged to be protected from. This isn't just another true crime case. This is a story about warning signs ignored, about calls that went unanswered, about a mother who tried to do everything right but still ended up buried beside her child. It's also a story about a system designed to protect, but one that too often chooses indifference until it's far too late. Stay with us as we unravel this tragedy. If you have any thoughts or insights, we want to hear them. Drop your comment in the section below and tell us where you're watching from so we can give you a shout out. Aisha Nelson wasn't a statistic. She wasn't just a name on a headline. She was a woman with roots, with history, with people who loved her deeply. She was born and raised in New Jersey, in a family where bonds ran deep and traditions mattered. She had sisters, including a twin named Angela, whose connection to her went beyond ordinary sibling love. Twins often describe their relationship as a mirror of the soul. And that's exactly what Angela would later say. Losing Aisha felt like losing half of herself. From a young age, Aisha had a reputation for being steady and dependable. She wasn't loud. She wasn't the type to demand attention. Instead, she carried a calming presence that made people feel safe around her. Friends remember her as someone who always showed up, who remembered the little things, who brought peace even in chaos. That quiet strength eventually led her to the United States Navy. Service, discipline, structure, it fit her perfectly. She thrived in an environment where hard work and sacrifice meant something. The Navy gave her skills, but it also gave her a sense of purpose and the foundation for building a future. And yet, behind the uniform and the strength, Aisha was still a woman with soft spots, especially when it came to love and family. She longed for stability, for a home where her daughter could grow up surrounded by warmth and security. That desire for love and stability would eventually lead her into the arms of a man named Waverly Halls, known to most as Dante. At first, he seemed like someone she could connect with. Like Aisha, Dante had military service in his background. To a woman who valued discipline, who believed in shared sacrifice, that kind of common ground must have felt comforting. It looked like the beginning of a shared dream. 2 people who had walked similar paths, now building something together. But not everything that shines is gold, and sometimes the very thing that seems like a bond becomes a chain. By the time Aisha became a mother, her priorities shifted completely. Her daughter, Harper, wasn't just the center of her world, she was her world. Harper was 6 years old in 2022, still small enough to believe in cartoons and bedtime kisses, yet old enough to notice when the adults around her were fighting. She was sweet, tender, and full of energy. A child who lit up every room she entered. A child who believed her mother's embrace could keep her safe from anything. But safety is fragile when the walls of your own home hold danger. Aisha wanted Harper to grow up in love, not fear. That's why she tried so hard to make things work with Dante. She wasn't just thinking about herself. She was thinking about her daughter's future, about the importance of family, about giving Harper a chance to see unity instead of conflict. It's easy from the outside to ask, why did she stay? Why didn't she leave sooner? But when you're inside a storm, when your finances, your emotions, and your child's well-being are tangled into the chaos, walking away isn't simple. And for Aisha, it was even harder. She was far from her New Jersey family, living in Dayton, Ohio, in a home that wasn't even fully hers. It belonged to Dante's family. His relatives lived nearby, controlling the environment in ways that made her feel isolated. So she stayed. She hoped. She tried to hold everything together with the strength she had always carried. But no amount of calmness or sacrifice can change the core of someone who doesn't want to change. To the outside world, Dante was charismatic in his own way. He carried himself with confidence, he knew how to talk, and he had that smooth ability to make people feel like he understood them. For Aisha, disciplined, steady, and hopeful for stability, their connection seemed real. He too had military service in his past. That kind of shared experience meant something. It felt like they spoke a similar language, one shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and the pursuit of structure. It wasn't hard to imagine why Aisha thought this relationship might be the start of a secure future. Here was someone who could relate to her, someone who could understand the sacrifices she had made, the burdens she carried, and the life she was trying to build for her daughter Harper. And so, Aisha made a choice. She left behind her familiar world in New Jersey and moved to Dayton, Ohio, to build a life with him. To many, that might seem like a leap of faith, but to Aisha, it was an investment in family, in love, and in the dream of raising Harper in a stable home. When Aisha moved into Dante's home, she wasn't just stepping into a new relationship, she was stepping into a new family dynamic. Dante had a daughter from a previous relationship. To some women, that might have been a challenge. But not to Aisha. She wasn't the type to divide love or to draw lines between mine and yours. Instead, she embraced Dante's daughter. She made an effort to create a home where both little girls could feel loved and safe. To her, Harper and Dante's child deserved peace, joy, and stability, no matter what history lay between the adults. She wanted Harper to grow up seeing love in action, not division. Neighbors and family members could see the way Aisha poured herself into her role, not just as Harper's mother, but as a caregiver for both children under her roof. That was who she was. Nurturing, selfless, always willing to make sacrifices for the sake of unity. But beneath the surface of that blended family, cracks were already forming. It didn't take long for Aisha to realize that Dante wasn't the partner she had hoped for. While she was working hard to create stability, he wasn't contributing in the same way. He wasn't holding down steady employment. Instead, he spent long hours at home, often absorbed in video games, while the financial responsibilities of the household weighed heavily on Aisha's shoulders. For a woman like Aisha, who had built her life around structure and sacrifice, this imbalance was more than frustrating. It was demoralizing. She had envisioned partnership. She had envisioned a man who would step up, who would share the weight. Instead, she found herself supporting the household while Dante remained stagnant. And yet, she stayed. Why? Because Aisha was a believer in potential. She had a heart that saw not just what people were, but what they could be. She believed that love, patience, and encouragement could help a person rise above their flaws. She believed that with time, Dante might grow into the man she thought he could be. But the truth is, some patterns are hard to change. And in Dante's case, his history already carried dark warnings. He had prior charges of assault. He had already shown a pattern of violence in past relationships. These weren't just small red flags, they were glaring warning signs. Still, Aisha tried. She believed in giving chances. She believed in holding on to hope. She believed in creating a home where Harper could see family, not chaos. But love can only stretch so far before it breaks. The shift from hope to fear often happens slowly in relationships touched by abuse. At first, the signs may seem small. An argument that turns sharper than expected, a disagreement that leaves you feeling uneasy. But then those moments pile up. For Aisha, the cracks became too obvious to ignore. Dante's temper flared easily. He wasn't just passive or inattentive. He could become controlling and aggressive. And when alcohol was involved, those sparks turned into fires. Soon, the man she had trusted began showing his true colors. Not as a partner, but as someone who needed control. He made threats. He waved around the very gun Aisha herself had purchased. He cut off her access to finances, drained her bank account, and used money as a weapon to keep her trapped. And yet, even as the danger escalated, Aisha tried to de-escalate. She tried to remain calm, to find ways to survive the storm without escalating the conflict. For her, it wasn't just about her safety. It was about Harper's. Her daughter was watching. Her daughter was listening, and the last thing she wanted was for her little girl to live in constant fear. But by trying to keep the peace, Aisha's calm demeanor was misinterpreted. Outsiders, including the police, would later see her composure not as survival, but as a sign that she wasn't truly afraid. That misjudgment would cost everything. By the time 2022 rolled around, Aisha's relationship with Dante had become more like a prison than a partnership. She was isolated from her family back in New Jersey. She was financially trapped, unable to simply pack up and leave. And she was emotionally bound by the hope that maybe, somehow, things could still improve for the sake of the children. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't love anymore. This was survival. She began reaching out for help. Not in dramatic ways, but in careful, measured steps. She started documenting the threats. She made calls. She tried to create a paper trail, something that could protect her if things escalated further. And soon the calls would come. Calls to the very system that promised safety. Calls that would be recorded, logged, and then, tragically, dismissed. By now, the picture of Aisha's world is clear. A strong woman caught in a cycle of control, trying desperately to create stability for her daughter, and facing a partner whose past should have been a warning of what was to come. It was the evening of June 22, 2022, when Aisha picked up the phone for the first time. She dialed 911 and explained that her boyfriend had threatened her life. She didn't embellish. She didn't exaggerate. She stated the facts plainly. He had possession of a firearm, one she had purchased, and he had threatened to use it against her. Those words alone should have been enough to set off alarm bells. A known history of domestic violence, a weapon in play, a direct death threat. Any one of those factors should have prompted swift, decisive action. But instead, she was told to head to a police station or meet officers somewhere neutral to file a report. Shelters were mentioned. Options were listed, but no one came. For Aisha, the weight of that response was crushing. She wasn't just calling to document her fear. She was calling because she needed intervention, because she knew this man had the means and the willingness to hurt her. But the calm tone in her voice betrayed her. The dispatcher treated her like a routine caller, another box to check, another report to file later. Hours passed, the sun set, the air grew colder, heavier, and Aisha's fear grew with it. By midnight, now officially June 23rd, she called again. This time, she asked officers to meet her at a family dollar store. She didn't want flashing lights pulling up to the house. She didn't want her abuser's family, who lived nearby, to see what was happening. And most of all, she didn't want to ignite Dante's rage by having police show up on his doorstep. So she tried to meet them halfway, literally. She offered them a safe, neutral location where she could file a report quietly. She said again that she didn't want him arrested. She wasn't seeking vengeance. She just wanted protection, or at least a record of the danger in case something happened. But as she waited in that parking lot with Harper asleep in the back seat, minutes turned into hours. Police were busy with other calls. Officers were stretched thin. And Aisha was left in limbo, alone, afraid, trying to keep her daughter safe while the system stalled. Think about that moment. A mother sitting in her car after midnight, a child curled up in pajamas in the back, and a phone in her hand that had already failed her once. She had described the threat. She had mentioned the gun. She had laid out the history. And still, no one came. Eventually, exhausted and scared, she told dispatch she'd wait until morning. She'd try again then, but morning would never come for her. Sometime after 1:30 a.m., the phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't Aisha calling. It was Dante. He told dispatch that his girlfriend was acting crazy, that she had torn up the house, and that he wanted her gone. Notice the manipulation. He painted himself as calm, as reasonable, as the victim of her behavior. It's a common tactic of abusers. Flip the script, cast the woman as unstable, and let the system believe the man in control. When officers finally arrived around 1:40 a.m., they walked into a home where hours earlier, a woman had reported being threatened with a firearm. A home where children were present. A home where danger was not hidden, but spelled out in plain words. And yet, instead of recognizing the risk, the officers dismissed it. When Aisha spoke to the officers, she explained again what had been happening. She told them he had waved the gun, that he had threatened her, that he had drained her finances, cut off her credit cards, and left her with no way out. She explained that she was paying the rent, that she had every right to remain in the home, and that she wasn't going to let him push her out. But here's the tragedy. Her measured tone betrayed her. One officer later admitted he didn't believe she was in immediate danger because she seemed too calm. Too calm. That phrase echoes like a haunting refrain, because in reality, her calmness wasn't a sign of safety. It was a survival tactic. A woman who has to stay composed because her child is in the next room. A woman who can't afford to cry or raise her voice because it might provoke violence. A woman who knows that sounding hysterical could make authorities doubt her story. So she did what she thought would save her. She stayed calm, and that very choice was used against her. The officers had every chance to act. They could have confiscated the gun.
I did try to do this discreetly because, like I told her, his dad owned about 3 or 4 houses on his block. His granny lived next door. Like I really didn't want to upset him. So I called. I let the dispatcher know what was going on. I let them know that he had already threatened me twice.
I mean, at some point, it would have to come here.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. Like I told the dispatcher, like, I don't mind y'all talking to him.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be around while y'all talking.
Right. So, listen, here's what I explained to him.
Okay.
You know, you guys are adults. So, you know, you're obviously both trying to provide a safe space for your children.
I don't think so, though. Because like I told her, he's walking around the house waving his gun that I purchased. Like he didn't start making any threats last night. He had the gun, so I told her I discounted it to the fact that he was out all day yesterday, had Taco Tuesday drinking. So, I mean, I was like, maybe, you know, if we go to sleep. But today he woke up with the same shenanigans, and everything, all of this is in front of my daughter. Like that's the issue that I have. You say like we're adults trying to provide a safe space.
Well, I'm not saying
he's
that.
not trying to create that environment for his daughter or mine.
Listen, what I'm saying is, let's try to let cooler heads prevail, rational minds prevail. And if this isn't a good situation for you, start to make a transition into another situation.
Well, he cut my credit cards off and cleaned out my bank account.
What I'm saying is, where there's a will, there's a way.
Well,
They could have filed a report. They could have removed him from the home, even just temporarily, to give Aisha and Harper a chance to breathe. But they didn't. After an hour, they left. They left a woman who had explicitly said her life was being threatened. They left children inside a volatile home. They left behind a gun that should have been seized as evidence. And they left Aisha with nothing but her own courage to keep her alive. What makes this part of the story so haunting isn't just what happened, it's what didn't happen. There was no dramatic standoff, no shouting match in the front yard, no flashing lights that drew neighbors from their beds. Instead, there was silence. A silence that stretched through the night, swallowing Aisha's last hours alive. While Harper likely drifted off to sleep, unaware of the storm surrounding her, her mother stayed awake in that fragile silence, wondering if she'd done enough, wondering if anyone truly believed her, wondering if the calm tone she had forced into her voice had cost her the chance to be saved. By the time the officers drove away, Aisha's fate was sealed. Within just a few hours, she and Harper would be dead. And the question that still lingers is this: how many times does a woman have to say the words, "I'm afraid for my life," before someone takes action? Write your comment on the comment section. The house on Burleigh Avenue looked ordinary that night. A modest Dayton home, lights still glowing softly in the windows, children tucked away in their rooms. From the outside, you'd never know that inside those walls, terror was unfolding. The officers had just left. They had spoken with both adults, heard Aisha's side, listened to Dante's excuses, and then decided it wasn't a crisis. They filed no official report. They seized no weapon. They gave no protection order. They didn't even escort Aisha to safety. They simply left. To them, it was another domestic dispute, loud words, conflicting stories, and no visible injuries. Nothing that, in their minds, warranted immediate action. But to Aisha, it wasn't just a dispute. It was a countdown, a fuse already lit. And now she was left standing in the dark, with nothing but her instincts and her little girl asleep upstairs. Sometime between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m., silence settled over the home. The officers had cleared the call, the police radios moved on to other emergencies, and Aisha was alone again with the man she feared most. Imagine her thoughts in those moments. She had done everything she was told to do. She had called not once, but multiple times. She had explained the threats, the gun, the past violence. She had even tried to stay calm so she would be taken seriously. But still, she was dismissed. And now, in the quiet of the early morning, she must have realized she was completely unprotected. Her abuser was still there. The gun was still there. And her 6-year-old daughter was only a few feet away. For a woman in her position, options were slim. She could try to leave in the middle of the night, but with no family nearby, no money left after Dante drained her bank accounts, and a child depending on her, where could she go? She could sleep in her car, but she knew that wasn't safety. It was just another form of vulnerability. So she stayed. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. We may never know exactly what sparked the violence that night. Maybe it was another argument over control. Maybe it was financial tension, or something as trivial as the missing PlayStation console Dante had obsessed over earlier. With men like him, it often isn't about the issue at hand. It's about dominance, about reminding her who had the power. What we do know is that at some point, Dante picked up the gun, the same gun Aisha had purchased, the same gun she had warned police about, the same gun that should have been confiscated hours earlier. And with it, he ended her life. Aisha was shot in the basement of that home, the very space where she had begged officers to intervene, where she had explained the threats, became the place where her worst fears materialized. But the violence didn't stop with her. Standing in the path of his rage was Harper, just 6 years old, still wearing the innocence of childhood, still believing her mother could protect her from anything. She never stood a chance. One moment she was a little girl dreaming about cartoons and bedtime stories. The next, she was a victim of the same violence that took her mother. The house went still. No more phone calls, no more arguments, just silence. While the rest of Dayton slept, unaware of the horror that had unfolded, Aisha and Harper lay lifeless in the very home that should have been their sanctuary. And for hours, no one knew. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Burleigh Avenue, but inside, it was darkness. The cereal bowls left on the counter, the signs of a life interrupted, were now eerie reminders of the normalcy that had been shattered overnight. Family members began to worry when Aisha didn't answer her phone. She had been so consistent, always checking in, always reachable. The silence wasn't like her. And soon the worry turned into dread. By the time authorities returned to the home, this time not for a dispute but for a welfare check, the tragedy was already complete. Inside, they found the bodies of 31-year-old Aisha Nelson and her 6-year-old daughter, Harper. Both shot, both gone. The moment Aisha's family learned what had happened is impossible to put into words. For her mother, the grief came with a sharp edge of betrayal. She had listened to her daughter's cries for help. She knew Aisha had done everything right, and still, she was gone. "All I know is that my daughter and my granddaughter were killed. That's it," she said through tears. But her heartbreak was laced with rage. Rage at a system that had been warned and did nothing. Rage at the officers who had walked away. Rage at the reality that 2 lives had been taken when they could have been saved. For Angela, Aisha's twin, the loss was even more unbearable. Twins aren't just siblings, they're 2 halves of the same soul. Angela would later say that losing her sister felt like losing a part of herself that could never be replaced.
News says a big piece of her is forever gone.
I really get stuck sometimes. Like, I can't believe that my sister is not here. And then me being her twin sister is like, I'm just broken.
A big piece of me is forever gone, she admitted. And for the rest of her life, every reflection in the mirror would carry that reminder. While Aisha's family mourned, Dante fled. He left Dayton, crossing state lines, running from the crime he had just committed. For 3 days, he stayed on the move, evading capture, leaving behind only unanswered questions and shattered lives. Finally, he was tracked down in Alabama. But when police found him, there would be no trial, no confrontation, no chance for Aisha's family to demand answers. He was already gone, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. By his side lay the gun, the same gun Aisha had warned about, the same gun police had left in his possession, the same gun that ended the lives of a mother and her daughter. And so, in less than 48 hours, everything changed. A woman who had begged for help, who had followed every instruction, who had kept her voice steady even in terror, was gone. A child who should have been safe in her mother's arms was stolen by the very man meant to protect her. And the system, those sworn to protect, had walked away. It wasn't just the gun that killed Aisha and Harper. It was the silence, the indifference, the failure to act when every warning had already been spoken. The night of June 22 to 23 wasn't just a crime. It was a turning point, a reminder that calm voices don't always mean safety, that composure doesn't equal protection, and that sometimes doing everything right still leads to the worst possible ending. But this was only the beginning of the story's ripple effects, because after the murders came the outrage. The community demanded answers. The family demanded accountability, and the police department, faced with undeniable failure, had no choice but to investigate its own.
DPD released a statement saying Officers Terrell Moore and Catherine Santos have been suspended for 160 hours and have received written reprimands and are required to attend additional training, but the family attorney says that just isn't enough.
2 lives were lost, and we're saying that a 30-day suspension is warranted and some retraining. What needs to happen is immediate termination and retraining of the entire Dayton Police Department.
For those who loved Aisha, one question lingered louder than all the rest. Why didn't anyone listen? She had told them. She had spelled it out. She had warned them about the gun. She had explained the threats. She had even asked for the simplest thing. Just a report, just documentation in case things got worse. And yet, she was gone. The questions weren't just for police. They were for the system itself, for the courts, for lawmakers, for a society that too often minimizes the voices of women who say they are in danger. How many calls for help are ignored? How many warnings are brushed aside? And how many lives are lost because we mistake calmness for safety or composure for security? By the time the funerals came, Aisha and Harper's story had already become larger than life. Their names weren't just written on obituaries. They were spoken in city halls, whispered in church pews, and shouted in protests. Their deaths were no longer private tragedies. They had become a public indictment of the very system that was supposed to protect them. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because as the grief gave way to anger, Aisha's family would demand accountability, and the Dayton Police Department, under a flood of scrutiny, would be forced to answer for what happened that night.